When we did the crash testing at 55 miles an hour, which is a standard speed that rear impacts occur, the third row occupants are dead instantaneously. But what happens here is that the occupants in the third row end up killing the second row occupants because they are being propelled forward, and it becomes like a trash compactor effect.
Hey there, I'm Travis Patterson, and welcome to Driving Change. Here, you're going to find unfiltered insights and hard-hitting questions that challenge the status quo in law and in life. As a personal injury lawyer in Fort Worth, Texas, I see firsthand how challenges like distracted driving and other just general family safety issues really impact our community every single day. But I refuse to accept these problems as inevitable. In this podcast, we're going to dig deep into real-world problems, bringing you practical solutions from my experiences in practicing law, raising a family, and running my own business. I'm not here to preach to anybody. I'm here to simply ask questions and start conversations that make you think differently and provide you actionable advice that you can use right away in your own life. So welcome to Drive and Change. Let's get to it. All right, welcome to another episode of the Drive and Change podcast. Got a good one for you today. Brought in an expert in the field of car safety and crashworthiness, Mr. Todd Tracy. How you doing today, brother?
Well, I'm doing all right. How about you, Travis?
I'm doing well. Thank you for making the trip to Fort Worth.
No problem.
This is going to be fun. We're going to learn a lot. So, Todd, this podcast audience is a mix between lawyers, of course, but a lot of parents. And what I try to do is put out content to make families safer. And so you were an obvious choice for a guest for this podcast. I went to your presentation a couple weeks ago at Joe T's to the Tarrant County Trial Lawyers. Seen your pitch before. Always impressed by it. Always come away learning a lot that I can apply to my own family and friends, things like that. So wanted to have you on and get into it.
Looking forward to it.
So for those of you that don't know Mr. Tracy, he's out of Dallas, Texas. He is really the country's leading expert attorney, in my opinion, on crashworthiness cases. Basically, well, I'll let you define crashworthiness, Todd.
Well, crashworthiness, it's really an engineering phrase, but it basically means this. How does your vehicle perform when it's involved in a vehicle accident? What are the safety systems, and how do those safety systems perform after an accident happens?
And how did you get into this field?
Well, years ago when I was in law school, I worked for a law firm that defended vehicle manufacturers. And then after law school, I went and worked for another law firm that defended various vehicle manufacturers. But I wanted to be proactive rather than reactive.
Right.
And so went and worked for a law firm in Dallas and then ultimately formed my own firm over 30 years ago.
And you have a background in
Well, I have a degree in applied physics, which is you take principles of physics and then you apply principles of engineering to help solve problems. So I understand the math, I understand the engineering.
Yeah.
The hardest part about my job is trying to understand the biology because of biomechanics.
Right. Well, you have a gift, obviously, it was on demonstration the other day, of taking a very complicated engineering term or concept or whatever and applying it in terms we can all understand. I mean, you've got more metaphors than just about anybody, and I'm sure we'll hear a few of them today. But you also have a crash lab, which is pretty odd. You have a lawyer who has his own crash lab, which I think is a warehouse where you just crash vehicles and use dummies and this kind of thing, the kind of stuff you see on TV.
Well, we have, we're fortunate enough to have the wherewithal to do a bunch of testing. Where we do dynamic testing, we do static testing, but probably the best testing we do at our law firm, we have to farm that out to a company in Buffalo, New York called CalSpan, which is, there's only 3 National Highway Traffic Safety Administration test facilities in the country, and we're allowed to use one of them. And then Wichita State University in Wichita, Kansas, they probably have the best sled testing facility in the world. And so we use them exclusively, up to 150 times a year.
Oh, wow. So what is a sled test exactly?
Now, a sled test is not it's not a destructive test. What we do is we take a vehicle and we cut the engine off, we cut the transmission and axles off. That way we can do repeatable testing. So we'll take crash test dummies, and we can run them in frontal impacts, we can run them in side impacts, and we can run them on rear impacts. And then we can do repeatable testing over and over and over again when we're trying to work on evaluating a potential defect or evaluating a potential safer alternative design.
Okay. Because I've seen some of the videos, and these cars get just demolished in these tests.
Now, on the crash testing, they do. It's a one-shot deal. So we will do crash testing. We'll do frontal impacts, side impacts, and rear impacts, where we conduct vehicle-to-vehicle crash testing. We do vehicle-to-barrier testing, and we also do vehicle-to-moving barrier testing. But they are destructive. They look violent. They are violent.
Right.
But so's car accidents.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember you said the other day, a normal negligence attorney, normal PI attorney, kind of like the work that we do at our firm, we're talking about what caused a wreck and obviously the injuries associated with that. What a crashworthiness lawyer looks at is slightly different.
It is. Where negligence lawyers, they focus on who caused the accident. I could care less who caused the accident. A crashworthiness lawyer focuses on who caused the injuries.
Right.
And I always equate this distinction between the cause of an accident versus the cause of an injury to the Titanic. April 15th, 1912, the Titanic went down. 3,000 people ultimately passed away. Not a single one of those people that passed away had a broken bone, a bruise, a cut.
Right.
But 2.5 hours later, they were dead. Why? Because there weren't enough safety boats on board.
Right.
So the engineers, the management company, the owners of the shipping line, they didn't focus on protecting everybody on board.
Right. All right, so let's talk about families, because what's cool about your career is you have seen more testing than just about anybody. You've done more cases than just about anybody, probably tried more cases than anybody. And so you've probably been able to gather just a ton of information that will actively keep families safer. And so I want to get into that. Let's start with families, right? With kids. My contemporaries, I'm about to be 40. Me and we all have little kids running around everywhere, and so we're hauling kids to school and practice and all sorts of stuff. So, what are the biggest problems you see with just kids and vehicles?
Let me break it up like this. First of all, children should never dictate to their parents when they get out of a car seat.
Right.
Or a belt positioning booster seat. Parents need to leave their children in car seats and belt positioning boosters as long as they can. All right? That's the first problem.
And when you say as long as they can, as long as they fit in those things? Or?
Well, I'm a big believer that forget about the weight and height of a child, because you may have some gargantuan parent and they may only be 4 or 5 years old, but the bones of that child are not ready for a crash yet,
right,
because they haven't calcified yet.
Right.
So I'm a big believer that we need to wait. We need to put more emphasis on the age of the child and the strength of their bones. Okay, so that's why you want to keep them in the car seats as long as you can. And the car seats being 5-point harnesses, meaning each shoulder has a separate shoulder belt. You then have a lap belt tether in between their legs, and then you have it going across the abdomen. That creates 5 points.
Right.
It's a racing harness.
Right.
You then want to make certain that you, as you get them out of those, that you then put them into a belt positioning booster, because a belt positioning booster raises the child up so that the vehicle seatbelt system will fit the child appropriately.
Yeah.
And by that, what I'm talking about is you want the shoulder belt staying off of the neck, and you want it staying centered on the clavicle. Right. It's critical that you do that. Otherwise, they're going. If the child doesn't fit in the seatbelt properly, the child they'll misroute the belt. They'll put it under their arm. Right. They'll put it behind their back, and then there's absolutely no safety benefit whatsoever. In fact, the belt becomes an instrument of harm.
Right. It can do more harm than good if it's
absolutely.
Not used. Yeah. So on the shoulder strap, as these kids get a little bit older, we want it across the chest, not over their neck for obvious reasons. And then the lap belt, we want that over their top of their legs, correct? Not over their stomach.
That's correct. And in fact, with the on the car seats, it's always going to fit them properly, because it's going to be below the iliac crest, which are those pelvic bones. Okay. As you get them out of car seats and you get them out of booster seats, then what happens when the kids are 9, 10 years old, they're going to start sitting in the back seat of the vehicles. And you want to do that because if you've got a front airbag and the children weigh over 100 pounds, then the airbag's going to fire.
Right.
Here's the problem with kids. Here's the problem with kids in the back seat. They have a tendency to slouch.
Right.
The reason they do that is because the edge of the seat hits them wrong. So when they want to be able to bend their legs so that it's comfortable for them. Mm-hmm. Well, if they're sitting completely upright, then their legs are not allowed to sit on the seat properly. So what they end up doing is slouching. The second a child begins to slouch or an adult begins to slouch, that changes the belt geometry.
Right.
The lap belt it goes over the iliac crest, those hard pelvic bones, and gets into the abdomen. Mm-hmm. The shoulder belt is misrouted. And that's a critical element for safety, is making certain that you have the belt routed properly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here. What I see a lot, Todd, is a lot of parents have their cars pretty well set up for their children and the booster seats and all this kind of stuff. A lot of them do, not everybody, obviously. But then what happens is you got carpools after school, and you got to get the kids to practice, and everyone's shuffling around and trying to help each other out. And it's hard, practically speaking, to get the proper car seat in every single car and do all that kind of stuff. So you see a lot of shortcuts there.
Well, and parents don't mean to do it. Parents always want to do what's best for their children, but they do get in a rush.
Yeah.
And they will end up putting a child in a vehicle that doesn't have a child seat. They will put them in a belt that doesn't fit them properly.
Right.
They will double up a belt with two kids.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And then we've got the problem with third row vehicles, which is a major problem that most parents have no idea about.
Okay, so let's get into this. And this is the scary stuff, right? And I remember when I heard this, I went and looked at my cars and made sure we were okay. But these third row vehicles, not all of them, but some of them are not as strong as others, correct? So from now on, we're going to assume that your kids are properly in the right car seats or booster seats, or maybe they've graduated from that. So let's assume that the child is in proper restraints. So what are the kinds of problems we can still have in vehicles with kids?
Absolutely. Okay, so let's just take the basics, for example. Let's say that let's focus on the front seats for a moment.
Right.
If you're an adult male and you're at what they call a 95th percentile, so you're 6'2", 223 pounds. You have a child.
Okay.
You need to not have the child sitting behind that 95th percentile male, the dad. Here's why. If you're involved in a rear impact, the vast majority of seats are going to collapse backwards if you get involved in a rear impact accident because the seats are simply too weak. You're going to end up crushing your child. So where do you put the child? Well, if you have a center seat position, knowing full well there's no occupant in front of you, that would be the safest position,
right,
provided it does have a 3-point shoulder, a lap and shoulder belt combination seat. Now, let's say you've got 3 kids in the second row seat. Here's what you've got to do. You put the largest kid in the center seat. You put the lightest child behind the heaviest occupant, and then the second, and then the middle child or the second largest child behind the right front passenger, which is typically going to be a female.
Right.
Because mom and dad's, the dad has a tendency to drive, the mom has a tendency to ride in the right front passenger seat. Why do we do that? Weight, the weight of the occupant and the crash forces involved are going to collapse those front seats.
Yeah.
People have no earthly idea that that's happening out there in the real world, and it can be catastrophic.
How common are seatback failures for 95th percentile?
100%. If you are involved in a delta V of 22
miles an hour.
22 miles an hour. So 2 miles an hour faster than a school zone.
Right. That's not very fast.
The seat's going to collapse backwards.
All right. So what about if you're under? I mean, obviously, I'm sure once you get under, does it depend manufacturer to manufacturer on how strong their seats are?
It does. I mean, there are some excellent seats out there that are made by various manufacturers, and not only the OEMs, what we call your brand names, your GMs, your Fords, your Chryslers, Toyotas. That's the OEM, but the seat suppliers, they're the ones that really are the specialists and experts in seat design. We have some excellent ones out there. I mean, where the way we measure and the way we determine safety for a seat is looking at inch pounds, okay? We have seats that are out there that are 76,000 inch pounds, and we've got seats that are out there right now that are 10,000. I don't know about you. I want the strongest seat sitting in front of my child.
So, yeah, absolutely. So if you only have one kid, obviously, whoever it is, put them on the other side of the car from the driver if you can.
Put them in a seat where there's no one in front of them. Right. If there is someone in front of them, stick them in the center seat, provided there is a lap and shoulder belt combination.
Right. Okay. But when you have a whole mess of kids and you fill up your car, then you have to obviously make strategic decisions.
Well, I joke when I give speeches because it is so serious. I always say, well, always put your neighbor's kids in the seat behind the heaviest one because they're not your loved ones. But obviously, I'm being facetious on that. But you have to, parents have to be vigilant every single time they get in a car.
Yeah.
For example, on these carpools, seats. When they have child seats in them, they need to be readjusted once a week because the vibration and just normal driving will loosen those seats. You have to retighten them weekly. You have to make certain that the tethers are retightened. Mm-hmm. You have to make certain that the shoulder belts are not twisted. You have to make certain that the lap belt's not twisted because if a child's shoulder straps and or lap straps are twisted and are folded over, you can have upwards of 9 times greater chance of injury because you're not spreading the load out over the whole width of the belt.
Right. Oh, man. My wife is so good at checking for the twisting, and I am not as good at it, and this is a great reminder. So if you have car seats, just set an alarm on your phone once a week to go out there and just take a look at them.
Make it. Just make it. It's almost like it almost becomes like breathing.
Right.
Once a month, I'm going to check them, and you will be amazed at how loose they become.
Oh man, that's great advice, Todd. Okay, so you were hinting at the third row issue. Okay. So let's talk about third row SUVs.
This is about 3 years ago, I started looking at these kind of cases, and I'm wondering, where's the testing? Why hasn't the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration ever run a test where you've got instrumented crash test dummies in the front seat, instrumented crash test dummies in the second row seat, and instrumented crash test dummies in the third row seat? Then I started going, well, heck, why aren't the car manufacturers doing this? So I went and did the testing myself because I wanted to see how are these, what I'm calling the small and mid-size SUVs, and that is, if you've got 3 rows of vehicles and you've got about 6 inches of space between the third row and the lift gate, rather than having it like a full-size Denali or Yukon, a Suburban, even a Navigator, if you don't have that space, do not use the third row. Here's why. When we did the crash testing at 55 miles an hour, which is a standard speed that rear impacts occur, it takes the third row, those occupants are dead instantaneously. The third row occupants are dead instantaneously. But what happens here is that the occupants in the third row end up killing the second row occupants because they are being propelled forward, and it becomes like a trash compactor effect.
Gotcha.
Now, here's the fix. Do not make a vehicle ever again, car industry, that has a third row in it that doesn't have 4 feet of space. That space is critical. It's not cargo space. That's survival space for the crush. We need that crush so that we can take care of everybody in the vehicle.
So, okay, are you talking about I know the type of car you're talking about, the third row, and there's not a lot of trunk space. I know I saw on your website you've tested the Buick Enclave, the Honda Pilot, the Volvo XC90.
Yes.
And I was surprised because you see Volvo and you're like, okay, that's supposed to be the cream of the crop.
I routinely brag about the Volvo XC90. That was a blunder that they made, and I don't know if they truly thought it out. And Volvo is typically so great at anticipating problems in the future, but they had to keep up with the market.
Right.
And third row vehicle sale. But guess what? If there's no utility to it, and I see no utility to a third row vehicle that has 6 inches of space between it, because the risk of I'm telling you, the risk of serious injury or death far outweighs any utility, because the chances of us getting in a rear impact in an urban area like Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, any large city are just too high to take a risk on jeopardizing those third row occupants.
Are there any of those cars like the Toyota, for example, or are there any other brands that have better steel that can withstand those rear impacts better?
Not yet.
Are you not yet?
Not
so
yet.
You're out on all third row midsize SUVs.
Small and midsize SUVs, I'm not a fan, because they're not using the right steel. And what I'm talking about here is the kind of steel that they call ultra high strength steel or extra high strength steel or advanced high strength steel, where we study something called megapascals. We figured out the megapascals on how to protect the occupants in the survival space. You know, we've got vehicles that have 1,400 megapascals, surrounding our family. But then the rear structure, when you've got 200 and 230 or 300 megapascals, you might as well be driving around in a vehicle made of cardboard, because it's not going to prevent crush.
Okay, so we got third row seats. We got the seat back failures. You mentioned kids slouching. A similar issue, the reclining of the seats.
All right, now this is another bad situation. Kids have if you've ever had a kid that was a cheerleader or an athlete of any kind, or in the band, they work them to death.
Right.
So what do? They're always trying to find some time to catch some sleep, to catch a nap. So what do? They inevitably get in the vehicle and they recline that seat back. If you're reclining the seat back more than 45 degrees, that is an absolute recipe for disaster. All right, there's number one. Number two,
your seatbelt's
not going to do its job.
Worthless, right?
It's going to, if you get hit from the rear and you're beyond 45 degrees, you're going to get thrown out of the car.
Yeah,
that's number one. Number two, if you're in a frontal, your lap belt is going to you're going to submarine under your lap belt, meaning that lap belt is coming up over your pelvic bones. It's going to get into your abdomen, and you're going to have a colostomy bag the rest of your life, or you're going to have a broken back. Mm-hmm. Or you're going to cut your head off because you catch your neck on the shoulder belt.
Right.
All right, so imagine you're sitting there and you've got your seat perfectly upright, and you were on a long drive on a family trip, and you've got your sibling next to you, and you want to talk to them. Well, what's the first thing we're going to do? Well, we're going to reposition ourselves, and we're going to switch our hips. So we're going to now be sitting on. If you're on the right-hand side of the car, you're going to be leaning up and twisting, and you're going to be putting most of your weight on your left hip. Driver's side occupant's going to be shifted over on their right. Now you're looking at each other so you can carry on a conversation. Here's the problem. When you do that, it changes the shoulder belt geometry, so instead of hitting you on the clavicle, it's now cutting you into the neck or on the cheek. What do? You're not going to sit like that for several hours, so you're going to move the shoulder belt under your arm. Mm-hmm. The second you do that, you have just destroyed the ability for that seatbelt system to do its job, and it's ugly. If you put it under your arm, you will absolutely take out your ribs. Your ribs are going to fracture. Your fractured ribs are going to cut your internal organs. If you put it behind your back and you are involved in a frontal, you could theoretically, and it's not theoretically, I've absolutely seen it, where you cut your body in half.
Jeez.
It's the worst thing you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah. So I hope, if there's one takeaway from this, it's just to use your seatbelts, use restraint systems properly.
You've got, and guess what? If it's Easter Sunday and you've got a beautiful dress on, ladies, guys, if you've got your jacket on and you don't want to, and you don't want to have it wrinkled and everything, don't put your, go ahead and have some wrinkles. A wrinkled dress or a wrinkled suit never killed anybody. You may not make may
Sure.
not be on Vogue magazine's cover, but it's better than being in a morgue.
Absolutely. All right, so what's your favorite car for families? Let's say the safest car for families and I'm not talking about some $100,000 car, but
Right.
a family on a budget.
I tell you what, I love Subaru Crosstrek. I think they do it right. They do a lot of things right on the Subaru Crosstrek from a standpoint of their roof structure. I think that's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the Volvo XC90 still, if you're looking at the front row and the second row, I think the 90, the 60, and the 40 Volvos, I think that they're by far the best and they're most economical. I'm not a big fan of any minivans or MPVs, multi-passenger vehicles, and I'm not a big fan of pickup trucks. I prefer vehicles that have 4 doors because they're historically stronger.
Okay.
There are certain manufacturers that I'm not fans of. I'm not going to name any names, but they are Japanese in nature. We'll just say that. Okay. There are some excellent domestic vehicle manufacturers here. The Chevy Traverse, the Buick Enclave, the Buick Encore, they have got a safety system here called a center-mounted airbag, and they were the first to do it back in 2013. The problem what that does is that takes care of a phenomena called the far side occupant. So if you get hit on a side impact on the driver,
right,
and you're sitting on the passenger side, you don't have an airbag that's going to protect you unless you have this center-mounted bag. The problem that we have here in the U.S. is that the bag is too small. It's coming out of only one seat. So if it's not perfectly aligned, meaning the seats are not perfectly aligned, or the impact is not a perfect 9 o'clock or 3 o'clock direction, you're going to bypass the bag.
right.
And that's why you go to Europe and you look at the European cars. Back in 2020, the European manufacturers started offering tax credits if they started putting center-mounted bags in their vehicles. And they came out of both the driver's side and the passenger side, and these are huge bags. I mean, they're bigger than the front. They're bigger than the right front passenger bag here in the U.S.
So, okay, so when a car manufacturer sells a car in Europe versus in the United States, same manufacturer, same model, is it safer in Europe than it is in the U.S.?
It is, because the EEC, the European Economic Community Commission, that is who that's who controls the vehicle industry over there, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, who we pride ourselves on being the safest, and by far they are not. Most of our standards in the United States are inadequate. They are ineffective, and our safety watchdog, which is supposed to be the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the watchdogs end up being lawyers like me.
Yeah.
They are feckless, they are ineffective, and they are, and they don't have a budget left. You have to have money to do crash testing.
Yeah.
And when you've got a single law firm in Dallas, Texas, doing more testing than the NHTSA, something's wrong with our watchdog.
Yeah. Well, we're glad. Obviously, we're all thankful that you were in that space and filling up that void. But yeah, it makes me crazy that the same car could be safer in one part of the world than here in the United States. And just like, why can't we just make them as safe as possible?
Well,
Everywhere.
If I had my choice, there would be one set of unified laws globally, and here's why. First of all, it's going to save the vehicle manufacturers money.
You would think so.
Think about this: if I have to meet standards in China, Japan, South America, North America, Africa, Europe,
Yeah.
and yet Dubai, When I start looking at the cart, when I start looking at all the testing and I see, well, this has got to meet this one, this has got to meet this one. Let's make one set of rigid standards that they all have to meet, but let's make them the best.
Right.
Let's have a goal, and the car industry has for years said, we're going to have a goal that there will be no deaths by a date certain. We can absolutely do that if we had uniform and unified standards across the globe. It would absolutely save tons of money.
Right.
We don't have that.
No.
The car industry, for years, Australia and Europe had the most stringent testing standards in the world and performance specifications. The NHTSA has always fallen far behind because we have standards that were still in place 18 months that were created 18 months before Neil Armstrong walked on the moon.
Oh gosh.
The seat standard that I was telling you about earlier, it was adopted 18 months before Neil Armstrong walked on the moon and has never been revised. And when they drafted it, they forgot to put the weight of an occupant inside the vehicle. In 1967, when it was created, the average seat weighed 20 pounds, and it was 20 G's the weight of a seat. That's 400 pounds. Folks, that's a parking lot accident.
Have you ever seen those pictures of people on the beach, like in 1960, where like everyone's pretty in good shape? And now it's like that. It's not what Americans look like anymore, and our population's getting heavier and heavier.
Interesting you say that, Travis, because the anthropomorphic test dummies that we rely upon in this country and worldwide are based on anthropomorphic test data from 1955. If you look at a fifth percentile female in 1955 was 5'2", weighed 102 pounds. A 95th percentile in 1955 was 6'2", 223 pounds. The 95th percentile today is 6'4.5", 285 pounds. And a fifth percentile female is 5'4", 118 pounds. Even worse, 11 years ago, the car industry in the United States said we have to widen the rear seats because our buttocks, our gluteus maximuses, have enlarged so much in the United States that we have to expand the width of the vehicles 3 inches, because if we sell a three-person vehicle in the rear seat, it has to be a 95th percentile male that can sit in the seats without twisting. And it's called the designated seating position rule. It makes sense. The cars had gotten so narrow, one of the test dummies couldn't sit there with its back up against the seat, so they would twist it. It's asinine.
Yeah.
Thank God for Manjaro. Maybe we'll become safer. There's your plug for Manjaro.
Gluteus maximus is it's the first time I've heard that one. I think it's gluteus maximi, by the way, Todd. Okay. What about used cars? If you buy a used car, or if you get in some kind of fender bender and you go get your car repaired or whatever. All
right. Well, let's talk about the used cars first, pre-owned.
Yeah.
First of all, parents always think, well, I know my kid's going to be involved in an accident. I'm going to go buy them a cheap, crappy car for their first car. Biggest mistake parents make. You need to go buy the best car you can, knowing full well between 16 and 25, they're absolutely going to be involved in an accident. Typically, that's their fault. So you need to make certain that you surround your child with the best vehicle that you can buy that's got the most bells and whistles, okay? Go buy them a Crosstrek. Go buy them a used Volvo XC90, 60 or 40. That's the first thing, okay? People always used to say, I'm going to go buy them the heaviest vehicle known to man because heavier is always better.
Right.
Well, tell that to 18-wheeler truckers. They're driving vehicles. They're in vehicles that weigh, 25, 30,000 pounds. When they get involved in an accident, their roofs collapse like it's made of paper mache.
Right.
Just because it's heavier doesn't mean it's safer.
Right.
I've got multiple 1,500, 2,500, 3,500 trucks in our warehouse. And you got to remember, there's totally different standards for the weights of vehicles. Some of them aren't even applicable. Depending, if the heavier the vehicle, you think, well, the heavier the vehicle, you're going to have better safety standards. Not true. They're not even applicable. So the heavier does not necessarily equate to safety at all.
Okay.
Now, I remember my dad always used to talking about American steel. Man, he'd shut the door and say, "Do you hear that? That's good American steel right there." Then he'd take the vehicle over here and he'd say, "Do you hear that? It sounds to me like it's made of tin, that it's made of aluminum." Well, and so some testing was done where they took vehicles from the 50s and they ran them with vehicles from 2020. Guess which one won? The newer vehicles that were lighter weight, that had the new steel. They just kicked the rear. They kicked the older vehicles' rear. They're just much safer. So don't buy off onto the idea that heavier is better, that larger is better, because one of the safest vehicles in the world for urban driving is a smart car. They're not worth a darn out on the highways because of dirty air. They get behind an 18-wheeler and an 18-wheeler passes them. It creates turbulence because of their light weight. It literally causes them to roll over. But in an accident in an urban area, they are the safest vehicles I've ever tested. I can't find one that's bad unless you drop it from 6 feet up in the air, and I actually collapsed one's roof. But that's the
I
safest
imagine most
vehicle.
cars don't do great. Drop from 6 feet.
There's not a vehicle in the world. The reason we did that test because in the 60s, that was the standard that General Motors met for its vehicles. They would drop them from 6 feet onto the roof, and they were not allowed to collapse and destroy the survival space.
Oh, wow.
That was over 60 years ago.
What happened to that?
Well,
sorry, I got you on a tangent.
Well, now this is where the political soapbox comes in. Depends on the administration that comes in. And certain administrations focus on, safety. Some focus on other things. And when you start chipping away at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's budget, when you start focusing on other things, then what's the first thing? It's like anything else. What's the first thing you're going to get away from when you're a company and you're on the verge of going bankrupt? You get rid of testing. You get rid of engineering. And what do? You focus on styling because you've got to sell.
Focus on cup holders.
Focus on cup holders. You focus on bells and whistle items, but you don't focus on the things that actually save people's lives.
Yeah. All right, so going back to
now
buying a used car for your kid, pre-owned.
All right, so pre-owned, you buy, you get yourself a Crosstrek, you get yourself a Volvo. You make certain that you do not trust the Carfax. Hate to say that, but they're just not accurate. You take a vehicle and you take it to a certified dealer and you put them up on the rack and you look and see, has this vehicle been repaired? And you can tell real quickly if it's been repaired. If you see splices on the frame, if you see welding on the frame, if you see overspray, walk away. Okay? Because here's what happens, and which takes us into this idea about vehicles and repairs. Okay? I tried to get a law passed in Texas the last 4 sessions that said this: if you are a vehicle repair facility in the state of Texas and you can prove that you followed the original equipment manufacturer's repair specifications and you used original equipment parts, and then there was an accident and somebody died or was seriously injured, you were immune from liability, as they should be.
But if you cheat, you're not.
If you cheat, then you ought to get hanged.
Right.
Okay. Now here's what happens. But I will tell you, the repair shops, they absolutely want to use OEM repair specifications. The Fords and GMs and Chryslers and Toyotas, they tell everybody, they give them 40 pages of repair specifications say, do this, do this, do this, do this. And that's the only way you're going to restore this vehicle back to safety.
OEM. So if you bring in a Ford to the collision shop, they use Ford parts and the Ford process.
And it's got to be Ford OEM parts. Dude,
Right.
I'm a big I did a series of tests after a case called Seabachon versus Sean Eagle because there was some issues regarding the roof.
Mm-hmm.
A hailstorm had come through Dallas-Fort Worth, and there was a Honda Fit, and the hail had destroyed the roof.
Mm-hmm.
They took it to a repair facility, and the OEM repair specifications was the following. You have to replace the roof panels with spot welds, 234 of them, in fact.
Spot weld meaning?
A weld
Yeah.
so there's 234 of them that circumnavigate the entire roof. So that roof is not coming off.
Right.
Well, there was a cheaper way to do it that was quicker, called glue.
Oh, gosh.
So they glued this roof on with an adhesive. It was involved in a frontal impact, and the roof panel flew off. Well, the roof panel is sort of like whenever you build a house. Well, you've got the frame set up, but what makes that house structurally sound is when you come in there with the plywood.
Mm-hmm.
And you put it on. That keeps it from twisted. It keeps it from turning in, turning out, and that didn't do that. And that roof looked like an accordion because it lost all of its structural integrity. Well, we get into this thing, and Honda says, "Where's the 234 spot welds?" Because there were none, because they had glued it. So you got to make certain.
Honda said, "This one's not on us. You need to go talk to the repair shop."
They certainly did, but they didn't say it that nicely.
Right.
I can absolutely, because we were sitting. I have never in my life seen something like that before. So we start getting into it, and we realize, my God, they've replaced this thing. And then we realized the reason they had done it that way is because of pressure from an insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
It's cheaper for us because they can get them in, they can get them out. You don't have the labor aspects of this, and we can get you in and out quicker. So you have got to make certain when somebody gets involved in an accident that you take it to a certified facility. If you've got a Mercedes-Benz, take it to a Mercedes-Benz dealer. Do not take it to these. I'm not going to name any name because I don't want to get sued. But
right.
you don't take it to these shops that you know for a fact that you're getting steered to, because that's against the law.
Absolutely.
Your insurance company cannot tell you where to take your car. If you have a Mercedes, by God, you have the right to take it to a Mercedes, Ford, Chrysler, whatever it may be. You have the right to do it because they have the repair specifications and they have the parts. Here's what's going to happen. They're going to try to steer you to some other company that's not going to follow. They're going to follow another set of regulations and or repair specifications. There's number one. But then they're going to try to use these parts that are not necessarily OEM parts. Mm-hmm. They're close, but not completely there. How do I know? I did the testing. I went and ran OEM parts. I ran salvaged parts, and I ran these things called LKQ, like, kind, and quality. Like, kind, and quality. They may look the same, but they don't act the same when involved in a crash. Mm-hmm. And what we're trying to do is restore it back to back to its original equipment manufacturer's capabilities. But if you want to know the truth, the way the new cars are made these days, if a vehicle's bad enough where all of the airbags fire, the car needs to be totaled.
Wow.
Which is another good tip for you to pass on to your parents. Fight your insurance company, saying, every time I'm involved in an accident, I want the car totaled.
Because even if it's repaired to the OEM standards, it's not going to have the same crashworthiness.
It's never going to be the same, and here's why. Certain cars, the way this steel is made, with this high megapascals, anything above 750, you can't repair it.
Yeah.
It can't be stretched. You can't put welds on it. You can't put patches on it. And so what happens here is you take it to some non-dealer. They're going to go stretch the hell out of that thing and basically have, vehicle yoga done to this thing. Yeah. And they're going to stretch it. They're going to Frankenstein that vehicle, and it's never going to be the same. And it's your family that's going to pay the price.
Yeah.
It will not crush the same. It will crush where it's not supposed to. And these cars are, there's a lot of engineering that goes involved into these cars. When you look at a frame of a car, people are going, I wonder why there's a circle there. Or I wonder why it's a shape like a triangle, or it's shaped like a square, or it's shaped like a rectangle. Those are called convolutes. And basically those are crush. They will crush they will crush with certain levels of energy. Mm-hmm. Well, you go in there and you put a patch over that. That's a problem. It's not going to crush the same. So you now may be imparting energy into the survival space where you're not supposed to.
The crush is designed to absorb the energy.
Spread it out, and you're not.
So that's new cars. So if there's a used car and you know that it's been in a collision before, but you can verify that it was repaired up to standards, would that be okay, or are you still like, hey, no, go try to find something that hasn't been in a crash?
Well, I think it's okay if it's purely cosmetic. So that's when you get your Carfax, because the Carfaxes are pretty good about some of the issues about, we look at, when we look at a Carfax, I want to see where it was sold initially. If you've got a vehicle that's sold, let's say, in a different state other than Texas, and then all of a sudden it comes to Texas, you want to start tracking it down. Why?
Yeah.
It may have a salvage title from that other state that's not going to transfer to Texas. You need to if you ever see the word auction on a vehicle, you run. That's because it was involved in a major crash. Yep. It was sold at auction, given a salvage title to the insurance company. Insurance company then sells it at auction to someone else who comes to another state. Now it's got a clean title. That's why you always do a title history on the vehicle identification number.
Great advice.
Do we have to do some homework? Yes. Is it worth it when our children are driving it? Absolutely. But, if you can't afford a brand new car, that's what you got to do.
Gotcha. All right, let's talk to the lawyers real quick, Todd. If you get a case, you're trying to help a family out. Obviously, common scenario that I see just about every single day is that there's not enough insurance to handle the injuries involved. That's why I'm a huge proponent, obviously, of UIM insurance, umbrella coverage that covers UIM. I know you know all this stuff too. One of the issues is just people think that this stuff won't ever happen to them, so they don't really listen. But for the lawyers out there, how do you know when you have one of these auto products cases where they need to call you, say, hey, have you tested this before? What are your thoughts on this?
I always tell people this. If you have a client that comes into your office and there is a death, quadriplegia, paraplegia, catastrophic brain injury, and you do not have enough insurance or no insurance, because if it's a single vehicle accident, there may be no insurance involved. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Then you have to start asking yourself our question, what are my recovery options to help out my client?
Right.
Okay. That's why I'm a big proponent of never settling a case with somebody that's catastrophically injured or dead until you've done some discovery. Because you may have a dram shop case. You may have a commercial vehicle case.
Yeah. They might be on the job.
Right.
Right.
You may have a crashworthiness case. So here's what I tell people. Catastrophic injury or death, you need to forget about doing what's expedient and doing what's quick.
There's no pre-suit settlements for those.
You have an absolute obligation to do the best you can and to zealously represent your client. So go out there and ask some questions, okay? How did the vehicle perform? Mm-hmm. If there's 4 people in the vehicle and only one person's dead, where were they sitting relative to where the crash was? Maybe they were sitting right where the crush zone was. If they're sitting farther away, why'd they die? Maybe the seatbelt didn't do its job. Maybe they had it on wrong. I don't know, but let's do some engineering analysis. If you don't want to go do it, there's lots of good lawyers out there that know how to do this. But I am a firm proponent of this. I think any lawyer that's worth his salt, that can pass the bar, is absolutely capable of doing these kind of cases. You have to put the blood, the sweat, and the tears in it.
Yeah.
And, to do that, you've got to ask some questions like we used to when we were in law school.
Right.
We were so entrenched in this idea about always thinking outside the box, and that's all crashworthiness is how did the vehicle perform relative to everyone else in the vehicle?
So don't just rely on ChatGPT, but actually use your brain and think through it.
I bet I get 10 calls a week on ChatGPT and these AI stuff, and I said, I don't want it anywhere in my office because people hire me because of me, not because of AI. And not only that, but AI doesn't understand what I do for a living.
And if you ever gotten an email from Todd Tracy, you know damn well that AI did not write it. This came from the lips of Todd.
There's usually, and I've done a good job today not having any obscenities because parents could be watching today, including my mom. I want to make certain.
Yeah, you've done a good job. All right, I'm going to do a couple rapid fire questions for you, and then I'll get you out of here. You ready? Take a swig of water.
I'm absolutely ready.
All right. Most common vehicle defect that you see, and what can parents do about it?
Seat back collapse cases and rear impacts. And what can parents do about it? Pray that you're not involved in a rear impact crash that's of a Delta V, and or don't be too heavy. It's sad. If you are over 175 pounds and you get hit in a 30-mile-an-hour accident from the rear, your seat's gonna collapse on the vast majority of vehicles.
Okay, earlier you said 100% if you're over 200 and.
If you're over 223 pounds and you're involved in a 22 Delta V, you're absolutely your seat's going to collapse.
Okay. But for a 175 pounder,
you've got more of a chance. And the reason I put 175 pounds, that's the 50th percentile male.
Right.
So, and that's what the car industry designs its vehicles to, the 50th percentile male.
Okay. Paul, my producer, is trying to get me down 175 pounds, so this is good motivation. Both you guys are helping me out.
I'm trying to look at this. We're trying to save your life for different reasons. Maybe because the camera puts on 15 pounds. I'm just trying to save your life in general.
I got 3 cameras on me. All right. I think you've already answered this. Safest car for a family on a budget. You talk about a
I love Subaru Crosstreks. I love Volvo 90s, 60s, and the XC90, 60, and 40. I think they're great vehicles.
And what about families that need the third row?
Third row, you better get yourself a full size Suburban, Tahoe, Denali, Yukon, Expedition.
Right.
You've got to have something that's got a minimum of 4 feet behind the third row.
Might have to go buy a new car after this episode. Thanks a lot, Todd.
I'm just trying to help the economy as much as we can. We need all the help we can get.
All right. What's one thing every parent should check on their car today?
You make certain that none of the seatbelts are ever twisted. If they are twisted and they are not hanging, when they're stowed, the seatbelt should be flat. It should never have a twist in it. If you are wearing a belt that's twisted, it's going to degrade the capability upwards of 300%.
If you were king and could mandate one safety feature today, what would it be?
Put center-mounted bags in both seats and out of the roof in the second and third row.
Do you think self-driving cars will be here soon?
I sure hope not. Because first of all, I would never get in one, but I will not endorse autonomous driving vehicles until I have a cell phone and or a remote control that can be dropped in water and work after that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not ready for prime time, haven't been ready for prime time. The car manufacturers know we're not ready for prime time. The reason autonomous driving vehicles are out there is because Wall Street's pushing them, not the car industry.
Because you see the taxis, or whatever you call them, not Ubers, but
these Waymos
in certain towns.
Interesting story about Waymo. I'm over at the Range Rover dealership the other day, and there's 2 Waymos in there, and they go, "Oh, by the way, they're in here because they crashed because they stopped receiving a signal. Oh, and the signal was coming from Indochina."
What?
The signal that they were receiving, that whenever it's receiving the information, was coming from Indochina. And by the way, they don't speak English over there, so there was a lag in reading and understanding and interpreting and translating all of the signage.
Yeah, I'm out.
Don't get in a vehicle that doesn't have a driver. Hell, even if the driver's distracted, at least you've got a driver in the car.
Yeah. I mean, because you hear people who are real techie, they're like, say, oh, well, drivers are the one that cause 99% of the problems and all that kind of stuff. And so this takes the driver out of it. But do you really trust the technology?
Well, I always look at it like this. Well, we also have on our planes,
right.
We've got, we have autopilot.
Right.
But guess what? Autopilot does not take off and land.
Right.
We leave it to the experts because there are too many other variables that you want to have. You want to have the institutional knowledge and the expertise from a human at the end of the day.
Yeah. What keeps you up at night when you think about vehicle safety?
I worry that the front line are the lawyers and not the agencies and not the car industry, because the car industry absolutely has the absolute capability to eliminate all deaths. Those engineers can do it, but here's the problem. The CEOs and the executives at the companies are too concerned about Wall Street dictating to them, well, you've got to do well during the next quarter or during the next quarter.
Yeah.
They need to get away from that mentality and focus on where are we in the next year, the next 3 years, the next 5 years, because profits will come if you provide a good, safe, reliable product. And who cares if you have 18% profits if we stay at 12% profit every year rather than having the dips, the peaks and the valleys? Because what's killing the car industry are the recalls. I mean, year after year after year, more vehicles are recalled than are sold every year.
Wow.
That's frightening to me.
So if they can just look beyond the next quarter's profits, then they can actually start solving this problem.
Wall Street needs to get out of the vehicle safety business.
Right.
And they need to let the engineers do it. And engineers and marketing need to get in the same room together and say, we can build a vehicle that's safe, but also looks cool. Instead of, they don't even talk anymore.
Yeah.
That's just wrong.
Yeah, that's terrible. Well, Todd, I was at a conference when I was a baby lawyer, trucking conference actually in Nashville. And I remember, I think it was Joe Freed, one of the founding guys of that group, said, just one takeaway I want you all to remember. If you do your job right as trial lawyers, you'll never really know how many lives you save. And that's stuck with me, probably more than anything else I've ever heard at a CLE. Maybe aside from you blowing up airbags and stuff 5 feet from me. But that stuck with me. And when I think about that type of lawyer who saves lives, you're one of the first guys that come to mind. Not just what you've done for your clients, but what you've done for the auto industry, making cars safer. I know, based on all the evidence, and I truly believe it, that cars are safer today largely because of the work that you've done over your entire career. So thank you on behalf of all of us, on behalf of parents everywhere in our community. I think guys like you and guys like you do make our world safer. So kudos to you, and thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the compliment.
All right, man. We'll see you. Thanks.
All right, goodbye.
If you liked today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast, and don't forget to leave us a review. It really does help us get the word out. As we dive into these important conversations about safety and about community, I'm reminded of why I became a personal injury lawyer in the first place. Every single day, I see people whose lives have been turned upside down because of some accident in one form or another. It's a confusing and overwhelming time, and it can feel impossible for folks to know where to turn. If you or someone you love have been in an accident like that and you need honest guidance, give us a call. We'll get to know you, get to know your story, and we will be with you every step of the way. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.